Paltrocast. Andrew, how's your day going aside from answering the same questions over and over and over again?
It's going great. It's a beautiful day here in Toronto. It's Thursday. I went to a Jays game last night. So yeah, life is good. And we're on air in the US. So not a lot
Yes.
to complain about.
Yeah, I'm glad you have this job because you didn't already have like five jobs and you didn't already have, award wins from three or four different huge institutions. So congratulations on getting Son of the Critch
Thank you.
onto the US stations because, I know it's this all-time great top-ranked Canadian series. When did you find out that it was crossing below the border?
So really, we've been on air for 4 weeks. But we got word that the CW was interested last October at MIPCOM. So I was in the south of France. I got tapped on the shoulder, and they're like, "It looks like we have an offer from the CW," and we've kind of been building towards this ever since. And one thing I can say is it's such a perfect home for the series.
Yeah.
The CW Entertainment president is a guy by the name of Brad Schwartz, and Brad's Canadian. And Brad used to be the president of Pop TV, and Pop TV is who
It's
brought
great.
Creek
Yeah.
to the US. So he and I have a very good relationship, and we talk all the time. And it's just how the stars aligned and brought us back together, and how having a show that seems to be connecting with audiences. It's been quite a remarkable ride, and we're just getting started.
Yeah, now Schitt's Creek, what you mentioned, of course, executive producer I'm speaking with and all that. Now, Schitt's Creek, I have to admit, I'm one of those people who didn't watch it the first four seasons. You just heard, oh, it's on Pop TV with Impact Wrestling, and you go, oh, okay. And then during the pandemic, you hear this is the funniest show on television, and then
Yeah.
the wife and I, watched the whole thing in 4 or 5 weeks, the 80 episodes, and we know it's an all-time great kind of thing. So it's wonderful to see that this series is getting that treatment where it had the couple of seasons of award-winning things in Canada. Now we get it in the States. Were there any alterations needed for it to come over here, or is it exactly the same show?
It's exactly the same show. And I mean, that was, we didn't know how it would land. This is a show that is very specific in time and place. It takes place on a remote island in the North Atlantic.
Yeah.
And if that wasn't enough, we set it in the 1980s.
Yeah.
So it's we just didn't know, because it's like specific on top of specific.
Yeah.
But we know that at least in Canada, audiences were reacting that no matter where they were, what their upbringing was, they're like, that's my childhood. I can relate to Mark. I can relate to the family, this sort of thing. And so we're like, will this work? Will that be the case in the US? We had no idea. We just put it out there. Brad trusted us, and really trusted the show. And, it seems to be working out really well on the CW. And we have 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is pretty cool. And yeah, so it's surprising and wonderful. And, I'm so proud of kind of all the people that have made this happen.
Are you originally from Ontario?
No, I'm actually, I grew up in Southern Alberta, and then sort of made my way east. But my mom is from Newfoundland. So she grew up in Newfoundland. My grandparents were there. I still have aunts and uncles there. And my parents met in St. John's, Newfoundland. So there's a real personal connection to the series as well.
Wow. Okay. What
Yeah.
exactly brought you out to Toronto? Because I know Toronto Film School is one of your other
Yep.
gigs.
Yeah. What brought me to Toronto was going to film school. And it wasn't at Toronto Film School, but I was, this young guy. I had no connection to the industry at all, but I loved television. I loved comedy. And I figured if I was going to take a shot at this, I had to be kind of where some decisions were being made, where there was a comedy scene. So I moved here in 1998 to go to school. I did a bachelor's it was called Radio and Television Arts. And then I did a master's in communication, and just started selling shows and building the company.
Well, with Canadian filming, we would know as a joke, as New Yorkers looking down on everything. Okay, that's not New York, that's Vancouver in this '80s film. The Big Apple was never really New York, and then we know movies like Billy Madison that was not filmed in the States. Everything was being filmed pretty much in Vancouver and British Columbia. But nowadays, because of From and Schitt's Creek, now it looks like most things are filmed in Canada, but rural Canada as well. When did you start to notice that you didn't have to be in LA or New York to really work extensively in film and television?
Yeah, I kind of, when I started, it wasn't quite there yet. And what's interesting is, from a historic point of view, where in my opinion, where kind of it changed and where the switch flipped was in the last writer's strike, which was 2008. And that's where there were these 1 hours being produced in Toronto in Canada for Canada's largest private broadcaster, CTV at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they and it was a show called Flashpoint, and they had a show called The Listener. And these were the first real sort of prime time 1 hours that crossed over. And when that happened, a big bright light kind of was on Toronto, the not just in terms of the crew and the facilities, the infrastructure, but also that shows set in Toronto could actually cross the border. And then that led to like Orphan Black, which was another one that crossed over. And comedy took a bit longer. But it was Schitt's Creek, it was Letterkenny, and those, and Working Moms, Kim's Convenience. These are shows that were able to be exported and find audiences. And it's just led to not only a booming industry in Toronto and Canada, but we're playing ourselves, right? We're Toronto's Toronto, St. John's is St. John's. And it's just a nice evolution in where the industry is going. That being said, the majority of filming in Toronto and Canada remains production services work. So it's where, sort of this above the line is from LA or New York. They come up here, and the physical production happens here. But we're seeing more and more domestic taking on a bigger piece of that.
Before I ask my last two questions, we also didn't mention your Kids in the Hall recent credit. Yeah. Yet another Canadian institution right there. So congratulations on that as well. It was great to see that finally happened, and Paul Myers' work got spotlighted even more. Everyone loves Paul Myers. But two quick questions, and then I let you go. The first is, when people creep through your social media, we see that you were at Coachella last year. You had your outfits ready and all that. But we also see that there's a folk rock artist, Stompin' Tom, that you're following.
Yes.
So why did you go to Coachella? Because you clearly have great musical taste. Was it a particular artist or two, or did you go for the fashion show aspect?
Went for the artist for sure. So I have two kids that are teenagers, and one is my daughter, and this should come as no surprise, is a huge Harry Styles fan, and Harry Styles was headlining. And then my son just loves hip hop, and it was just like, that is sort of, he needed to be there for that. So the whole family went, and for me, of course, I had to turn it into a fashion event as well. But it was pretty awesome and fun to spend time with my family there. But I've always had this connection with music, and it started off in a really odd way. I had a friend who was a tour promoter, and for those of you who don't know Stompin' Tom, he's kind of the Canadian Johnny Cash. Everything, he sang about Canada. He was kind of this wandering musician, like a troubadour. He would just kind of walk from coast to coast and sing songs and write about it, and eventually became a recording artist, and a living legend at the time. And an icon. And I got to know him through a tour promoter, and he's like, we have to make Tom's last concert. And we did that. And I interviewed Tom, his last interview, his last concert. And that went on to be a Canada Day special up here. And I think like 2 or 3 million people watched it. It was pretty amazing. But prior to that, and this is something, I don't know if this is in my IMDb or not, but I worked very closely with Charlie Pride.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So Charlie and I were close, and I did something very similar with him, where I went on tour with Charlie, interviewed him many times. and produced a concert special with him. And what a fascinating guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Broke a lot of barriers. So what I've learned in closing, Andrew, is you can do the most basic stuff, and then you could also do comedy.
yeah.
In other words, you appeal to both the mainstream and the niches. So I won't be surprised if you are an EGOT, the Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony in the near future.
Hey, it's not a bad ambition to have.
But thank you for the many years of great work. Really looking forward to what's coming next. And congrats on Son of a Critch, getting great reviews, getting into the US market, and possibly becoming the next Schitt's Creek. And I mean that in a good way.
Thanks so much, Darren. It's really nice talking to you.
Paltrocast.